Shalom everybody, Rabbi Edelstein here with a short Torah thought sponsored by MEOR, Washington, D.C. MEORDC.com is our website. Check it out and learn about the programs we offer. Well, it's a sad time in the Jewish calendar and even in the world at large. It's a time of great turmoil and great peril. Tomorrow night, it's not coincidental, tomorrow night, Monday, August 8th, at sundown begins the saddest 25 hours in the Jewish calendar, the day known as Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av, the day on which both temples were destroyed. The Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492 on the day of Tisha B'Av, and other tragic events throughout our history. It's a day of fasting. It's a 25-hour fast, rabbinically ordained, but in many ways as serious as Yom Kippur, although we can go to work on Tisha B'Av and do things like that, unlike Yom Kippur. But a day of fasting, a day of mourning the loss of the temple, mourning the state of exile, what it means, what it has meant for 2,000 years up to this day to be in a state of physical exile and spiritual exile. And it's a day when the book of Lamentations, written by Jeremiah, is read by candlelight or with dim lighting in synagogue on Monday night, and very sad, heart-wrenching prayers known as kinos are said on Tuesday morning, on the morning of Tisha B'Av, and many other aspects and observances of mourning. We don't sit on chairs on Tisha B'Av, but like mourners, we sit on the floor or on low stools until the noontime of the day, Tuesday itself. But it's a day of fasting and mourning. So let's focus for a few minutes on what it means. What are we mourning? What did we have in the temple that now we're mourning the loss of it? Well, the temple was the physical center of the world and the spiritual center of the world. And I don't just mean the Jewish world. It was the place where 3 times a year the Jewish people went on the pilgrimage festivals to be reinvigorated with a connection to God, because the temple itself was the connector between the physical world and the spiritual world. The place where God's Shekhinah, His presence, could be palpably felt more profoundly than anywhere on earth. That's what the temple was, and it was in our midst physically in Jerusalem when we lived as one people on the land of Israel. And even when we didn't live all as one, we'd come together as one to the temple 3 times every year. By the way, if you go to the Western Wall, as many people have told me, you can feel something there. You can feel the Shekhinah, because our sages say the divine presence never fully left that holy spot. But in the days of the temple, it was a place of spirituality and connectedness and clarity. So we live in a world without the temple. That means a world of less spiritual clarity, of cloudiness, of doubts and lack of emunah, of faith. And we certainly live even more so now, 2,000 years after the event. We live in a very, very dark time of hiddenness, God's hiddenness, not being able to feel even simple faith in God. We Jews, the people who brought to the world the faith in God's oneness, in God's divine providence, we're, as a people, we don't have that faith. We don't have that clarity. That's a result of the temple being destroyed. That's a result of the destruction of the exile, not to mention the horrible physical suffering, of course, and tribulations that we've gone through, the Crusades, the Holocaust in our day. We mourn all of that on Tisha B'Av. That is a day reserved for focusing on the pain of losing the temple and the pain of being in a state of physical and spiritual exile, with all the trials, tribulations, and suffering that followed in its wake. This is all part of the bitter mourning and sadness of Tisha B'Av. Now, we have to mention one important thing. It wasn't random. We caused it. As our Torah tells us, as the Torah itself predicts, exile, due to our straying away from following God and the Torah with a sense of joy and with a sense of wanting to grow. The Torah prophesied that this would happen, and it did happen, but the point is we're responsible. Our own transgressions, our ancestors' transgressions, but our own too, because the rabbis say every generation in which the temple is not rebuilt, it's as if it's destroyed in that generation. Now, there were individual sins that were more responsible for the downfall of the first temple and the second temple. The rabbis say the second temple, there was a sense of sinat chinam, of hatred between Jewish people. Not principled hate, not principled disagreements, personal hatred and jealousy and friction. So there were individual sins that are important to learn about, but I want to say that the main transgression, I would humbly offer, was that we weren't so interested in serving God. That mission that we had enthusiastically embraced, to be a holy people, to live by the Torah and through the light of the Torah to be a spiritual light to the world, we lost interest in that mission. And whether it was the wealth and material blessings of the land of Israel or other things that led to that, that's the bottom line failing that I think every one of us can focus on Tisha B'Av. How much do I want to be connected to God? How much do I want to live up to the incredible mission that the Torah, placed in our hands and that we willingly accepted to be a holy nation, to be a light unto the nations? So it's a day of mourning for the pain of exile and the destruction, for doing teshuvah. Every fast day is a time of repentance. It's our own transgressions ultimately, or our own lack of willingness to spiritually grow. Because God judges us as in the sense of how much we want to grow. Everyone at their own pace, certainly in our world today, where as a whole the Jewish people are far away from observance to the Torah, many sectors of the Jewish people. But do we want to grow closer to God? Do we want to grow closer to the Torah or not? It's a day to focus in on a very personal, intimate way in our own heart and soul on these issues. So it's a day of crying. Actually, the great rabbis say, we should cry that we don't feel like crying. Meaning, if we don't feel much of a connection to God, that itself is the paradigm of the destruction of the temple, that we don't feel godliness in our hearts or in the world. And the disunity of the Jewish people is a tragedy. And all the sufferings in the world, truthfully, are also a result of the Churban, of the destruction of the temple. So it's a day of crying, or trying to cry, and trying to focus on the pain of distance from God, but it's not despair. The rabbis say anyone who mourns Jerusalem is worthy and sees the joy of its rebuilding. That is not right. It should say anyone who mourns Jerusalem will see the joy, but it's in the present tense, because it means if we're able to feel a sense of lack and a sense of deficiency, that itself is hope. That itself is the heart yearning to reconnect to God. It's not a crying of despair. It's a crying of yearning to return to the spiritual clarity that we once had as a people. And each one of us are yearning to reconnect to God on a deeper and a more intimate level, to end our own personal exile, galut. Because an exile is collective and personal. So it's a day of bitterness, a day of mourning, a day of crying, but not a day of despair. A day of hope. Every tear we shed, or every moment it's hard to shed a tear. It really is. But, I would suggest, if you're not learning about Tisha B'Av directly or going to lectures about it, and there are lectures online you can find and so on, but if you're not learning directly about it, look at a picture of the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust is the very nadir of or pinnacle, no matter how you look at it, of what it means to be in exile in the physical sense. And not only the physical sense, because the Nazis scorned our God and scorned our religion. That's all part of the pain of exile. So look at a picture of the Nazis on Tisha B'Av. But the point is, it's not despair. God is still with us. We have to search harder for him in these days of hiddenness. But just like there's prophecies the temple would be destroyed and they were fulfilled, it will be rebuilt. And the Jewish people will be united again. And the joy and blessing of the Messianic age will come to fruition, come to pass very, very quickly, Mir Hashem, in our days. A day of hope. A day of, the rabbis say, we can get closer to God on Tisha B'Av than on almost any other day of the year. Because through feeling what we've lost, what we don't have, the connection we yearn for, we build that connection. Have a meaningful Tisha B'Av. It should be the last one we experience in exile, mourning for the destruction. And I'm going to try to make another video later this week after Tisha B'Av is over.